April 28, 1945, a crossroads somewhere west of the Elbe River. The world has shrunk to the size of a muddy trench and the iron shield of an 88mm flat gun. Smoke, thick and acrid, claws at the back of the throat, a constant reminder of the burning village just a kilometer down the road. For 19-year-old Flakhelferin Gisela Brandt, the rhythmic whump, whump, whump of distant artillery has become the new beat of her heart. The sound is a companion, a constant, terrible presence in the final, sputtering days of the Reich. Her Luftwaffe gray uniform, once a source of pride, is now stained with mud and grease, the fabric coarse against her skin. Her hands, raw and blistered from wrestling the heavy shells, tremble not from the cold morning air, but from a bone-deep exhaustion mixed with a rigid, terrifying resolve. She squints through the gun sight, the crosshairs dancing over a landscape of ruin, skeletal trees, the blackened husks of farmhouses, and the churned earth of 1,000 craters. They are the last line. That's what the Hauptmann had told them before he and the last of the regular army soldiers had fallen back, leaving their auxiliary unit to hold the intersection. You are the final wall, he'd said, his eyes hollow. You are Germany's shield. Gisela had believed him. She had to. The alternative was unthinkable. Beside her, Ilse, a weary woman of 40 with lines etched around her eyes that spoke of 2 wars, not just one, methodically wiped down a shell casing, her movements economical, drained of all wasted energy. Across the gun pit, young Lena, barely 17, gnawed on her lip, her face pale, her eyes wide with a terror she was trying desperately to conceal. They were 3 of the 8 women left to man the gun, a weapon designed to tear bombers from the sky, now depressed to face the flat, ugly silhouette of an American Sherman tank. Then the sound changes. The dull, percussive rhythm of artillery is joined by a new noise, a mechanical grinding, a rhythmic clatter and squeal that grows louder, more intimate, vibrating up from the soles of their worn boots through their very bones. You can feel it before you see it. It is the sound of the beast coming through the trees. Gisela presses her eye tighter to the sight, her knuckles white on the traversing wheel. "Sie kommen," she whispers, the words a dry rasp. They are coming. The order is passed down the line in hushed, urgent tones. Ilse slides the heavy shell into the breach, the clang of the block closing echoing like a death sentence in the sudden quiet. Every woman in the pit holds her breath, waiting. Out of the morning mist and the lingering smoke, the first shape emerges. It is low, wide, and olive drab. The white star on its flank is like a brand, a Sherman M4. Then another appears to its right, and a third. They move with a ponderous, unstoppable momentum, their machine guns chattering, spitting tracers that zip over the lip of the trench. Dirt and stones kick up around the gun shield. Lena screams, a short, sharp cry she immediately stifles. "Ruhig," Ilse barks without looking at her. Quiet. Gisela's world narrows to the crosshairs. The lead tank fills her vision. She has run the calculations 100 times in her mind. The range, the angle. She takes a breath, lets it out slowly, and grips the firing lever. The propaganda posters flash in her mind, the leering, brutish American faces, the warnings of what they do to German women. She is not just defending a crossroads. She is defending herself, her comrades, from the monsters. She is Germany's shield. With a prayer to a God she is no longer sure is listening, she fires. The recoil slams the 88 back, a brutal, physical shockwave that feels like a punch to the chest. The air splits with a deafening crack, boom, and for a glorious, fleeting second, Gisela watches the tracer round arc perfectly, a fiery red line scribed against the gray morning. It strikes the lead Sherman high on the glacis plate. A shower of sparks, a screech of tortured metal, but the shell ricochets, whining off into the sky. It does not penetrate. A collective gasp escapes the women in the pit. Before Gisela can even begin to reload, the tank's turret swivels towards them with a terrifying hydraulic groan. The muzzle of its 75mm cannon seems to stare directly into her soul. You know in that instant that you have been seen, that you are no longer the hunter, but the prey. The American reply is not a single shot. It is a storm. The tank's main gun fires, the shell screaming past their heads to obliterate a tree behind them, showering the pit in splinters. Simultaneously, its coaxial and hull machine guns open up, a torrent of lead that thuds and pings against the gun shield, chewing up the sandbags and kicking dirt into their faces. Another Sherman fires, then the third. The world dissolves into a cacophony of explosions, the shriek of metal, and the high-pitched hum of shrapnel. Gisela is thrown back from the gun sight, her ears ringing, her vision swimming. The air is thick with cordite and the smell of fear. Lena is screaming now, a continuous, terrified wail. Someone is shouting orders that are lost in the chaos. It is over in less than a minute. A high explosive round lands just short of the pit, and the concussion lifts Ilsa off her feet, throwing her against the trench wall. She slumps to the ground, dazed and bleeding from a cut on her forehead. The gun itself is twisted, its barrel bent skyward like a dying flower. The fight is gone. The shield is broken. Through the ringing in her ears, Gisela hears a new sound, the guttural shouts of men in English. Dark figures are swarming the position, rifles leveled. American GIs. They pour into the trench, their faces grim, smeared with dirt and exhaustion. They are not the leering monsters from the posters. They are young men, some no older than Lena, with weary eyes that have seen too much. Hands up! Oust and Hendon. The commands are sharp, professional. Gisela slowly raises her hands, her body trembling with adrenaline and defeat. The GIs move efficiently, disarming them, pulling the dazed Ilsa to her feet. They are firm, but not brutal. One of them, a corporal with a tired face, offers Lena a canteen of water. She stares at it, uncomprehending, until he gestures again, more gently this time. The women are herded out of the ruined gun pit and onto the road, their hands clasped behind their heads. Captain John Riley of the 2nd Armored Division watches them, his expression unreadable. He's seen it all in the push from Normandy to the Elbe, old men from the Volkssturm, boys from the Hitler Youth, and now women manning anti-tank guns, the dregs of a dying empire. As they are marched away from the crossroads, Gisela looks back at the smoldering battlefield. The Sherman tanks, their engines rumbling, are already moving past, continuing their inexorable advance. Her war lasted less than 5 minutes. Years of indoctrination, of sacrifice, of believing in the final, glorious victory, had ended here, in this muddy ditch. They walk past shattered German vehicles, past the bodies of men they had shared coffee with that morning. They are now prisoners, being led through the corpse of their own country by the enemy. The sky begins to drizzle, a cold, miserable rain that matches the hollowness spreading through Gisela's chest. The unknown lay ahead, a terrifying void shaped by years of propaganda. Every step takes them further from the world they knew, and deeper into the hands of the men they had been taught to hate and fear above all else.
The journey is a silent, shuffling procession through a nightmare. They march for hours, their boots heavy with mud, part of a growing column of gray, uniformed prisoners. The landscape is a testament to the totality of the war. Every town is a skeleton, every bridge a twisted heap of metal in a sluggish river. Columns of smoke stain the horizon in every direction. The sheer, overwhelming scale of the defeat is impossible to deny. You see it in the faces of the German civilians who watch them pass, faces etched with a dazed, hollow shock. You hear it in the endless grinding of American truck convoys, a sound of industrial might that Germany could no longer match. Gisela walks in a stupor, the defiant anger that had fueled her now replaced by a gnawing, empty dread. She watches the American guards. They are loose-limbed, casual in a way that is utterly alien to the rigid discipline she knows. They talk amongst themselves, smoke cigarettes, and occasionally share a joke. Captain Riley rides alongside the column in a jeep, his posture relaxed, his eyes constantly scanning his surroundings. There is no menace, no cruelty. They are treated with a detached professionalism that is somehow more unnerving than overt brutality would have been. Brutality she could have understood. It would have confirmed everything she had been told. This calm efficiency was something else entirely. It was the behavior of victors so certain of their power they had no need for sadism. It made her feel small, insignificant. Late in the afternoon, they arrived at their destination, a vast, muddy field hastily enclosed by barbed wire. It's a temporary collection point, a human pen filled with thousands of captured German soldiers. The Wehrmacht, the SS, the Luftwaffe, all reduced to the same huddled, exhausted mass. The women are separated from the men, guided into a smaller, secondary enclosure near a cluster of tents. The rain has stopped, but the air is damp and cold. Shivering, they sit on the wet ground, pulling their jackets tight around themselves. There is nothing to do but wait. Hunger, a dull ache for the past few days, now sharpens into a piercing cramp.
The last of their rations, a piece of hard bread and a slice of sausage, was gone 2 days ago. As dusk begins to settle, a new sight appears. GIs are setting up field kitchens. Great plumes of steam billow into the evening air. Then a smell drifts across the field. It is a foreign, perplexing aroma. It is the smell of roasting meat, but not like any German wurst. It is savory, slightly sweet, mixed with the sharp tang of something else, something vinegary. It is the smell of food, real hot food. The prisoners in the main compound stir, a low murmur running through the crowd. For the women in their small enclosure, the scent is a form of torture. It awakens a primal, desperate hunger that makes their stomachs clench and their mouths water. They have been living on watery turnip soup and ersatz bread for months. This is the smell of another world, a world of plenty they were told no longer existed anywhere. A young private, his helmet pushed back on his head, approaches their enclosure. He is carrying a metal tray. On it are strange creations. Not slices of bread, but soft, oblong white rolls, split down the middle. Nestled inside is a plump reddish-brown sausage, steaming in the cool air. A thick yellow sauce is drizzled over the top. The women stare, their faces a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "What is it?" Lena whispers, her eyes wide. Ilsa squints, shaking her head. "I don't know. American food." Gisela's mind recoils. Her indoctrination, the last solid thing in her crumbling world, rushes back to fill the void. "It's a trick," she says, her voice a low, hard hiss that makes the others look at her. "Don't you see? It must be." The others nod slowly, their fear latching onto her certainty. Why would they give such food to prisoners? Such decadent food. The bread is white, not made with sawdust and extenders. The sausage looks like pure meat. It doesn't make sense. The propaganda films, the speeches from Dr. Goebbels, the warnings from their officers, they all screamed of American deception. They would lull you with kindness, and then the poison would do its work. It had to be poison. It had to be fake. The private arrives at the wire, a tired, boyish smile on his face. He doesn't understand their German whispers. He simply sets the tray on the ground just inside the fence, gestures towards it with a tilt of his head, and says something in his alien tongue. "Eat up," is what he says. But to the women, it sounds like a death sentence. No one moves. They just stare at the tray of hot dogs, a baffling, terrifying offering from a world they cannot comprehend.
The silence stretches, thick and heavy. The tray of hot dogs sits on the damp earth, steam still faintly rising from the sausages, an absurd island of warmth and color in the gray, muddy enclosure. The American private, seeing their hesitation, just shrugs and walks away, joining his comrades who are already eating, laughing and talking around a small fire. The sight of them consuming the very same food is a paradox that Gisela's mind struggles to process. Is it a test? Do they poison some and not others? Or perhaps the poison is slow-acting, designed to cause agony later, away from watchful eyes. The possibilities, fed by years of carefully constructed paranoia, are endless and terrifying. The women huddle closer together, their eyes fixed on the tray as if it were a venomous snake. Ilsa, ever the pragmatist, is the first to break the spell. "They are eating it themselves," she murmurs, more to herself than to the others. "Look." She points with her chin towards the GIs. "Soldiers don't poison their own." Her logic is a small, sharp stone thrown into the murky pond of their fear. It creates ripples of doubt, but still, no one moves. To accept food from the enemy is an act of submission. To trust them is an act of betrayal against everything they have been taught. It feels like the final, most intimate surrender. Captain Riley, observing the scene from a distance, stubs out his cigarette on the fender of his Jeep. He has seen this before. Starving civilians, terrified to take a chocolate bar. Defeated soldiers, convinced a can of C rations is a bomb. He walks over to the women's enclosure, his boots squelching in the mud. He doesn't look at them directly, doesn't say a word. His presence alone makes them tense, their backs straightening. He stops at the wire, leans down, and with 2 fingers he plucks one of the hot dogs from the tray. He holds it up for a moment, examining it in the fading light. Then he brings it to his mouth and takes a large, deliberate bite. He chews slowly, methodically, his gaze sweeping over their faces. He swallows, takes another bite, and then another, until it's half gone. He gives a single small nod towards the tray, as if to say, "See, it's just food." Then he turns and walks back to his Jeep, leaving the half-eaten hot dog on the tray. His action shatters the paralysis. It is an undeniable, irrefutable fact.
An officer would not poison himself. The hunger, now a ravenous beast, finally overpowers the fear. It is Lena, the youngest, who moves first. Driven by a desperation that eclipses all else, she crawls forward on her hands and knees. Her movements are small, jerky, like a frightened animal. Her hand trembles as she reaches out and takes a hot dog. She doesn't eat it immediately. She brings it close to her face, her nose twitching as she sniffs it. It smells of warm bread, cooked meat, and the sharp, unfamiliar tang of mustard. It smells wonderful. Closing her eyes, she takes a tiny, hesitant bite. Her expression changes instantly. Her eyes fly open wide with astonishment. A sound escapes her lips, not a word, but a small, involuntary whimper of pure, unadulterated relief. The bread is soft, yielding, unlike anything she had eaten in years. The sausage is rich and salty. The flavor is overwhelming, an explosion of sensation on a palate accustomed to little more than watery broth. A single hot tear traces a path through the grime on her cheek. Seeing that Lena is not only alive but transformed, another woman, then another, scrambles forward. Soon all of them are eating, some tentatively, others with a desperate, frantic hunger, their hands shaking. Gisela is the last. She watches them, her entire ideological foundation turning to dust. The monsters were feeding them. The subhumans were sharing their rations. The lies she had built her life upon were so vast, so complete, that the simple truth of a piece of bread and meat was enough to destroy them. With a trembling hand, she reaches for the last hot dog, the one the American captain had bitten from. She lifts it to her lips. She takes a bite. The taste, salt, fat, bread, mustard, floods her senses. It is the taste of real food. It is the taste of a lie unraveling. It is the taste of utter, absolute defeat. A sob catches in her throat, a raw, ragged sound she cannot contain. It breaks free, a cry not of sadness, but of a pain so deep it has no name.
Gisela's sob is the key that unlocks the floodgates. As if given permission, Lena begins to weep openly, her small shoulders shaking as she clutches her half-eaten hot dog. Ilsa, the stoic, hardened veteran of 2 wars, turns her face away, but her body trembles, and a low, guttural sound of grief escapes her. Soon, the entire enclosure is filled with the sound of women crying. Gisela's sob is the key that unlocks the floodgates. As if given permission, Lena begins to weep openly, her small shoulders shaking as she clutches her half-eaten hot dog. Ilsa, the stoic, hardened veteran of 2 wars, turns her face away, but her body trembles, and a low, guttural sound of grief escapes her. Soon, the entire enclosure is filled with the sound of women crying. It is a strange and terrible symphony. They are not crying from simple relief or the taste of food. They are crying for everything all at once. For the gnawing hunger that has been their constant companion for years. For the brothers, fathers, and husbands who will never come home. For their cities, now rebel. For the Führer they had worshipped, now a ghost in a bunker. They are crying for the death of the world they knew, and the terrifying birth of a new one they cannot begin to imagine. Each bite of the impossibly soft bread is a judgment on the rock-hard, sawdust-filled loaves of the fatherland. Each savory taste of the sausage is a condemnation of a regime that had promised them the world, but had fed them on turnips and slogans. The simple, casual generosity of their captors is the most brutal weapon of all, for it demolishes the central pillar of their faith, the belief in the absolute evil of their enemy. If the enemy was not a monster, then what did that make them? What had they been fighting for? The tears are for their lost certainty, for their squandered youth, for the profound, sickening shame of having been so completely and utterly wrong. They cry because the propaganda, the hate, the years of sacrifice have all been washed away by a single, undeniable act of basic human decency. From across the compound, the American GIs watch the scene unfold. They fall silent, their own meals forgotten. The young private who delivered the tray stares, his brow furrowed in confusion. To him, it was just a hot dog, a piece of home. He cannot comprehend the complex political and emotional alchemy taking place in that small barbed wire pen. He sees crying women, and he feels a pang of pity, but he does not understand that he is witnessing the spiritual and psychological collapse of a nation, one prisoner at a time. Captain Riley stands apart,
lighting another cigarette. He does not look away. He watches, his face a grim mask. He understands more than his men. He knows this is the real surrender. Not the formal document signed by generals in a map room, but this raw, painful, deeply personal moment of disillusionment. This is where the war truly ends, not with a bang, but with the weeping of a hungry enemy who has just discovered their entire world was a lie. This scene in this muddy field in the heart of a dying Germany is a microcosm of a continent's agony. Across the ruins of the Third Reich, a generation raised on a diet of racial supremacy and promises of a 1,000-year dominion was being confronted by the simple, disarming humanity of their conquerors. The hot dog, the Hershey bar, the can of Spam, these became more than just food. They were symbols. Symbols of an industrial power and an effortless abundance that the Nazi war machine, for all its bluster, could never deliver to its own people. They were symbols of a truth more powerful than any speech Goebbels ever delivered. For Gisela, Ilsa, and Lena, the future is an abyss. They are prisoners of war in a country that no longer exists as they knew it. Everything they loved is gone or broken. But as they finish their meal, their tears slowly subsiding into exhausted, shuddering breaths, something else remains. It is the faintest glimmer of a possibility. The possibility that survival does not mean torture. The possibility that the world is not as simple as they were told. The war is over. The long, uncertain journey out of the darkness has just begun, with the strange, lingering taste of mustard and a foreign hope.